Thank you. That's excellent. And I just wanted to start with just the last couple of slides from last session, because I sort of rushed a little bit at the end trying to cram that in. But we were talking about that sort of makeup of risk under a safe system assessment. And if I go back, actually, we talked about risk being likelihood times consequence in a normal sense. So like economic risk or environmental risk or any risk is what's the chance the thing will happen, and then what's the magnitude of badness associated with it. But in this safe system assessment methodology, which is to a degree a particular risk assessment methodology, it's that extraction of exposure out, and then likelihood, and then severity or consequence. So, how many people are exposed to a particular crash type? What's the chance that crash type then actually transpires? And then what's the severity of injury we expect associated with that? And so really a safe system assessment, well, a big component of it is doing some quantitative analysis of exposure and likelihood and severity, and then multiplying them out. And just when we start to think then about treatments that we could put into the road and roadside environment or the street environment to alter some of these things, exposure is about changing the number of people exposed to a certain crash type. So it could be restricting the number of vehicles that can go through an area, changing the number of people crossing at a crossing point, or whatever it is like that. And so you can see this one was I showed there was a level crossing, which has it's a mound of dirt and a road closed sign on the other side. But that's eliminated the exposure to that crash. The separation of vulnerable road users from vehicles, it changes or removes the exposure to the crashes with vehicles. The likelihood, things that reduce the likelihood, we've been doing many of those for a long time in road safety. And those are, things like the geometric alignment of a road, the presence of signs and lines to warn and inform and guide, the surface we provide, sealed shoulders, tactile edge lines, lighting, all those sort of things. They're trying to reduce the chance a crash happens. Traffic signals in their own right, they are a likelihood reducing factor. So we know that you can still crash at high speed. People go through signalized intersections at high speeds with some pretty harsh angles, and we see the crashes happen. The severity of crash can be altered by, well, a fairly small handful of things. We've got the speed, we've got the levels of protection that are provided. So is it a vehicle? So if they've got crumple zones and the like, is it a vulnerable road user? So they're less protected. Have we got padding and helmets around and those sort of things? What's the angle the two vehicles crash at? So those are a few of the key things there. And slowing vehicles at conflict points, improving angles, those are things that can alter the severity. And also like thinking about how is energy dissipated in a crash or managed in a crash. So a barrier system, it is a crash when you hit a barrier system, but the energy is sort of dissipated over as the vehicle slides along the system. And that slow dissipation of energy is where we get these reductions in the severity. Hitting that barrier is a crash. So, like theoretically, in safe system assessing, really, addition of a central barrier system like there you see in this photo here, that will increase the likelihood of crash a bit because vehicles are going to hit that. So there will, without that central barrier system, there'll be vehicles that leave their lane into the opposing lane and they just get lucky that there's no vehicle coming the other way and they go back into their lane and they carry on. There's been no crash, there's been no incident. But we add the barrier system in the middle, they're more likely to hit it. But you see, the thing is that the severity of any incident comes down so significantly because that head-on is such a violent crash, and it's so likely to result in serious or fatal outcomes. So we're going to pick up this session, and we're going to be doing a lot of work in ensuring that you've all got your head around these three elements: the likelihood, the severity, and the exposure. So as per last time, keep your questions coming in the chat. I'll be asking you a few things. I've got a little exercise for you to do fairly early on here, get you involved, get you doing some stuff. And then we have at the end of today's session your first assignment. It's not a major onerous thing that you'll be having to do, but it's something that will actually, you'll be thinking about a local intersection for yourself, or one you know quite well, and you'll be doing some analysis of the exposure and the likelihood severity. We'll take you through that at the end. We'll show you how to upload it into the learning management system and what to do. Okay, so of course, don't forget to count your wallies, and hope you managed to do that and you did the quiz and got into that. So this session, we're going to delve further into those kinetic energy thresholds from different crash types. We started talking about that. I showed you that sort of colorful chart there with some numbers on it, but we'll dig a bit further into that. We're going to talk about characteristics of intersections that align highly with safe system principles, and characteristics of mid-block locations that align highly with safe system principles. So mid-block being just anything between intersections. Now, today's session will have a fair bit of focus on passenger vehicles. The next module, we talk all about pedestrians and cyclists and motorcyclists. We will have a bit of that going on in this session, but we're going to really be trying to unpack the issues for vehicle-to-vehicle crashes. As you can sort of see there, a vehicle-to-vehicle crash at an intersection. Now, it's interesting when you analyze risk on a road network, there's quite a few tools you could use to do that. And safe system assessments are sort of one of those. They have a particular purpose, but there are some more complicated tools. There's ANRAM, OSRAP, IRAP, IRR. You may have heard of some of those, you may not have, that's okay. They are essentially methodologies where you put inputs in and it spits out a risk score. When you look at a length of road, usually, and this works either urban or rural, what you'll find is, if I sort of draw over the top of this, if we've got risk here, and then we've got chainage here, so like length along a road, what you discover is that risk sort of bubbles along and then spikes. And of course, those spikes are the intersections. And then, sometimes mid-blocks have worse characteristics. Sometimes things get better. But there's an underlying sort of inherent risk. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, of what we can do about that. But then these intersections spike as our points of highest risk on the network. But they're only at these isolated points. So most people, when they think of that, they think just of this crash type that is happening. But actually, we see quite a variety of crash types at intersections. And then there's this interesting spot where, of course, in urban areas and some rural areas, we have pedestrians having to cross, of course. So we've added that into the mix. We've got cyclists who are trying to get through there as well, and that adds a complexity. But one that some people aren't quite aware of is that at a lot of intersections, we place point source hazards, either signals. signal pedestals, power poles. So we're running a power line along a road that has to turn down the road. Well, the power pole then goes right at the intersection and the corner there. We have drainage culverts because water needs to get across this road that it's come across. So all of those present what we call point source hazards. And we actually have an increased chance of a runoff road crash happening at an intersection as well, because there's so much turbulence happening at that intersection. And by that, I mean like a vehicle may come out into the intersection at an inappropriate time or try to turn at an inappropriate time. And a driver approaching that will avoid, because, you know, if they're able to see it, and they'll try and get, people don't want to crash, so they try and get out of the way of that, thus leaving the road. And it just happens to be at the point where we've put all these particular point source hazards. And it becomes really interesting because people often just completely ignore the idea of runoff road crashes around an intersection. And I've certainly seen a fair bit of that going on in different designs or proposals or the like. But it's a real serious issue for us to consider. So we've got that crash type that we can see on screen. We've got runoff road. We've got pedestrians and cyclists and motorcyclists involved in crash types. So there's a lot going on. Monash University Accident Research Centre, which they a while back sort of came up with some high-level principles on intersection design to try to get the best alignment with safe system principles. And I'm not going to sort of go through this in detail because I'd like to get you sort of putting this in practice. But it's interesting, when they went their first couple there, fewer vehicles and fewer intersections. Well, that's actually reducing the exposure to crashes, isn't it? When I was talking there about exposure and likelihood and severity, well, that's really reducing the exposure to crashes. When we get into fewer conflict points per intersection, that is about the likelihood of crash. Then we're also here in the speeds and angles, and that is about the severity of crash. So all of this is about the severity of crash. And then they've put in here those biomechanical tolerance levels that we talked about. So around the 50 kilometer per hour for that 90-degree crash. And then if you can get a little more angle on the crash, it's sort of, you're able to bounce off a little bit. It's the old year 10 vectors, if you remember your physics. You sort of, a crash, you bounce off a bit like that. So you're able to do that at a bit more speed, because what we're doing there is we're looking at delta V. Delta V is the change in velocity in a crash. So there's a less of a change in velocity in that crash angle than there is in that crash angle. Now, there's worse delta V in a head-on, but the reason we are able to get a bit more speed out of head-on crashes is that we have all of those features in the front of vehicles to absorb energy. So we've got crumple zones, airbags, seatbelts. They're really quite well designed on that. So that's why you can get those extra advantages. You'd see there that we're thinking about vulnerable road users, and if they're possibly in and around the intersection, we're trying to get speeds around that 30 kilometers an hour. So that's the sort of high-level theory of it. I've popped down this table in there to just sort of summarize a bit of that thinking. They've used something here called XChemX, which is the kinetic energy management model. That's far, far more detailed than you would need to do in a safe system assessment. And a safe system assessment, we're generally thinking about, okay, what are the crashes that will happen? what are the types of crashes, about what speeds are they going to happen at, and about what are the tolerances generally for those speeds. So you might see that they're proposing a new intersection like this, and you would say, okay, right. You don't need to be this precise, really. In CAD, it's pretty easy to spit out these angles, but instead of 104, you'd basically say, well, that's kind of a right angle crash, isn't it? I'm going to do this in a different color. Might stand out a bit more. That's sort of a right angle crash. And we just talked about a right angle crash for passenger vehicles. And we're thinking, okay, we want to ensure that that's around the 50 kilometers per hour or below. When they crash over here, we've got a bit more angle on that, don't we? So for that one, we could probably go 60 kilometers per hour or below. So you can see you're thinking about the angles and relating them to speed. Now that's just vehicle to vehicle crashes. If we were talking about, pedestrians crossing this side road here, for example, well, then we'd be saying pedestrian. We want to ensure that's 30 or below. Now, this is the severity of the incident. We're, of course, going to do everything we can to minimize the likelihood of it. We're going to have good sight distance. We're going to have controls in place if we need. But we really always think about, okay, this incident is going to happen. What road users are involved? What's the type of crash, the angle of crash, and what are our tolerable sort of speeds? Well, so you probably want to have a think about secondary crash impacts. This is a little bit of work that was done by the Centre for Automotive Safety Research at the University of Adelaide, just sort of replotting vehicles that have been involved in lots of crashes at intersections onto the one axis to see where your secondary death and serious injury occurs. And it's fairly obvious. I don't know whether the research was required, but some interesting sort of way of presenting it. Okay. I think it's time now for you to do a little bit of work. And I am going to give you a good bit of time on this, maybe 10 minutes or so, because it's going to be the start of your practice of categorizing into exposure, into likelihood, and into severity. So we're going to look at this intersection here, and I'll explain a bit about the intersection, and then I'll explain your task. And your task will be you as an individual, just thinking about things and jotting a few ideas down into the page. So this is a arterial highway, and it's got a 70 kilometer per hour speed limit. This is a major local collector road, or a collector road. It's got a 50 kilometer per hour speed limit. It has about 2,500 vehicles a day. The arterial road, the highway has about 23,000 vehicles a day. This is a shared use path here. It's residential areas all around here. This is a bus stop. It's a bus route. You can see it's a passively controlled intersection. By that, I mean it's controlled, well, it's controlled with a give way sign. These are service roads. They're two-way service roads. They're just making it so people can access their properties. They've got ways to get in and out further up. This is like a drain, like a culvert, drains water out there. What else can I tell you? About 300 meters up the road is a set of traffic signals. And about a kilometer down the road there, maybe a little more, there's another set of traffic signals. Down this road here, maybe 300, 400 meters down is a school, big school, primary, secondary school. So that's a bit of information about it. Let's just have a look from ground level. You can see there's the side road. You can see a vehicle coming out. It's got some lighting. That's that bus stop that I mentioned. 2 lanes in each direction on the highway. Looking from the other direction there. It's the shared user path over there. That's that sort of drain structure thing. Okay, so that's the scenario, and I'll welcome anybody who wants to ask questions about that as we go. Just pop them in the chat as you usually do. But your task is the removal of fatal and serious injuries at this location. I'm going to give you a budget of 3. I'm going to make it 4. Inflation, eh? I'm going to give you 4 million now. You got $4 million. You can't close the intersection. I know you thought, oh, okay, well, that might certainly alleviate intersection crashes if there is no intersection. But we've consulted, and the vehicles have to be able to enter and exit and go both directions and enter from both directions. You're operating in your current political framework. What does that mean? Well, it means if you come up with, something which is a highly, extreme idea, we want an idea of how we might be able to actually get that through the system. So, if you wanted to make the whole arterial highway down to 30 kilometers an hour, we'd like a little bit of info on how that can sort of be moved through and endorsed and accepted. So you're free to do what you want really there under these scenarios. And for each thing you come up with, I'd like you to categorize them. Have a go. Now, of course, you're just starting at this, so you'll make some mistake, and that's not a problem. But when you propose a change, is it going to influence the exposure to crashes, the likelihood of crashes, or the severity of crashes, or a combination? So take, for example, I don't know, maybe you say, we'll improve the lighting at the intersection, okay? Yeah, odd thing for you to say because you haven't seen it at night and there are lights there, but okay, let's improve the lighting. That would and then you'd put in brackets after that L, because that's going to it's going to reduce the likelihood of crashes. Now, a couple more things, and I can. Oh yeah, good. Loretta's put the example there. Well, I love it. Some of you may be saying, well, I don't know how much things cost. Like $4 million sounds like a lot to me. I don't know what I could do. Well, what I can do for you is be an instant cost estimator. So if you want to know the cost of something, just type it in and put cost ? And I will tell you a cost for it. Now, I see somebody's already jumping in there, rolling the sleeves up and getting in, but they haven't told me whether it influences exposure or likelihood or severity. And yeah, so have a think about that. Now, as I say, I'm going to give you a good sort of 7 or so minutes to have a think about it. Jot a few dot points in. You can do more than one thing. You can alter things, but I want each sort of particular element for you to say it either influences exposure or likelihood or severity. And yeah, so I said we had to sort of be able to access from both directions in and out. So a left in, left out is a great arrangement that does or could possibly reduce the exposure, but you're going to have to tell me a bit more at least about how that's going to work if people can get in from each end. Anyway, if you want to know the cost of something, just put it in. Otherwise, have a bit of a think, and we'll go from there. give you a good 5 minutes from now. The cost of signals has come in as a question. Signals $3.4 million for signalizing the intersection. Doing well here. I'm going to give it another couple of minutes, just seeing a few people popping a few others in. Okay. Wow, this is good. Oh, a couple more coming in. Okay, round a question in there around the cost of a roundabout, and there's that's a good question to ask. A full-size roundabout, compliant with Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 4B roundabouts for B doubles and large trucks and the like at a location like this on a multi-lane road. It would be about 9.5 million at this location. Services, land acquisition, pavement, big culvert structures, all sorts of stuff going on. So very expensive. Could we do something smaller? Possibly. Have a chat about that, I think, in a second. All right. Well, I'm going to start talking through a few of the things that have come in here. And first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you. This is good. Lots of ideas. And I'm really loving the fact that people are having a go at this exposure or likelihood or severity and scratching their head a bit, I think, and going, oh, maybe that's exposure. I'm not sure. And that's okay. That's the purpose of today. And you're going to have your assignment at the end of today to get more practice at it. And then you're going to have a quiz that involves it. The reason for all of that is that when you get to do your safe system assessment, you need to be pretty clear in your mind about what's exposure and what's likelihood, what's severity. Okay, let's have a look here. Well, we had immediately some interest in a roundabout. immediate interest in roundabout. And then there was a little bit of time before people were trying to work out, well, what is that going to influence? Is that going to be likelihood of crash or exposure to crash or severity of the crash? Now, roundabouts for vehicle to vehicle collisions, we're going to talk about that as one particular crash type. That would reduce the severity of the crash. But we know that there will still be crashes at a roundabout. If we see, rear end crashes start to increase at roundabouts, 2-lane roundabouts, we see side swipe crashes as people change lanes, have bad lane discipline and these sorts of things. But they're all quite minor injury crashes in the most part for the vehicle-to-vehicle crashes. So we generally talk about roundabouts as reducing the severity of crash. I'm going to talk a good bit next module around, actually, my colleague Max McCartan, our active transport lead, is going to talk a fair bit about roundabouts and pedestrians and cyclists and what can be done there and how we can manage that. But yeah, the challenge we often have is around the cost associated with roundabouts. I'll show a slide or two on that in a bit. And we had some people interested in traffic signals, signalizing the intersection and trying to work out, okay, are we influencing exposure or likelihood or severity with signals? And I talked to you just at the end of last session, at the start of this session, I repeated it. Signals we think of as reducing the chance of a crash, the likelihood of a crash, just likelihood. Sure, there's going to be some crashes that happen at signalized intersections that are, probably lower severity. Somebody sees the red light, brakes late, skids into the intersection and strikes another vehicle at lower speed than they may have. However, there is still very much the possibility of a vehicle running through at speed, striking a vehicle at the same angle, and we have the same severity. So we do say it just reduces the likelihood of crashes. It clearly says, this is your time to go. This is your time to go. And if everybody was to absolutely always follow perfectly, it would be an extremely safe treatment. But unfortunately, that's not quite the case. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. So then we had some interesting ones with people talking about side road activated speeds. And we had 2 people all at once there. Sube was in there and Kiani was in there too with RIORS, which is the rural intersection activated warning signs. Now, they're probably going to influence the severity of crash and possibly the likelihood as well. Generally, when we get a speed reduction, we talk about lessening the chance of the crash, the likelihood, and the severity of any incidents do occur. So sometimes you can get both out of that. It doesn't change the exposure to crash, the same number of vehicles, same number of people. Simon's talked about grade separating pedestrians like an overpass or an underpass or the like, and rightly saying that changes the exposure to crashes, and it does, assuming people use it. Now, there's lots in the design of that. Is it going to be convenient? And pedestrians don't like having to walk long ways up structures to just cross a road. But that's right. If we are able to get people to use it and they're separated, that reduces the exposure. Less people are exposed to those crashes. So reducing the speed zone on the highway from Chris. Yeah, that's another one that would reduce the severity and likelihood. We've got more interest in roundabouts. So getting a sort of left turn bay in place has sort of popped up, and that would reduce the likelihood of crash, really. It's probably not going to alter severity of incidents or exposure, but there might be less chance of some crash types occurring. Yeah, we've got more support for signalization. People want to move the bus stop. Okay, and that's an interesting one. People saying, okay, let's move the bus stop maybe, I don't know, down here or something. wherever they've decided to move it. Is that going to influence the exposure, the likelihood, or severity? I suppose at a very isolated assessment way of thinking, it would reduce the exposure because there's nobody exposed there. But we're kind of thinking about the whole intersection, aren't we? So we've relocated it, so we've made it a safer spot, a less chance of crash. So it's predominantly going to be the likelihood. It's a bit hard to say, yeah, that will eliminate the exposure because they kind of still have to, the bus still has to enter back in and the pedestrians getting off the bus still have to cross. So. Roundabout. Good. Okay. So I'm just skipping through here. Yeah. Okay. Some interest in trying to, how can we maybe get a roundabout in within our budget? And then Suvay right at the end there is talking about possibility of raised safety platform, which would possibly reduce the severity of crash. So I really liked that. I liked the fact that we had lots of variety and we had some good goes at categorization. I'm going to talk about some of those with a few slides, and I'll refer back to some of those points. But a lot of you said, yeah, traffic signals, and I can understand why. I think we've got a good bit of experience in the virtual room here of people saying, oh, unbalanced flow, it's a major arterial, it's got signals up and down from it. You know, it's looking like, you know, signals might work well. And yes, also the size and cost of other facilities. But as I talked about, we give this just a reduction in the likelihood of crashes, right? But when we analyze traffic signals across major population centers, we discover that is where the death and serious injury exists. This is death and serious injury hotspots. So just basically plotting them, and the more concentration of fatal and serious injury crashes, the brighter the hotspot. So you can see there, that's a signalized intersection, signalized. Well, you know, all the spots, they're signalized intersections. And that, like, it makes sense to a degree because that's going to be the high exposure. We've got a lot of vehicles crossing a lot of vehicles. But the idea that a set of traffic signals is safe is just false, right? When you have these speeds, roads of speeds of 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour, people just run the red lights and we're left with hugely severe outcomes. And if you were to filter the top 100 spots for death and serious injury in any major city in Australia and New Zealand, the signalized intersections are going to come out, are going to dominate the top 100. Yeah, there'll be a few others, but that's it. Yet we somehow almost just say, well, we've done our job as, you know, the traffic managers, traffic engineers. If they're not going to follow the rules, it's on them. And that's attitude's got to change. But we continuously just build these things. You see them popping up over and over and over again. And some people are thinking, maybe this one will be safe or perform better. We put mast arms and we put red light cameras and speed cameras, and they help out a bit with the likelihood. This one's got all of that. And it's still a huge hotspot of death and serious injury. So we need to rethink that. We need to rethink how we are operating those environments. And we will not eliminate death and serious injury with those. I'll come back to that in a bit. And actually, I might bring something else up shortly that I'll dig into my archives and show you something. Roundabouts. So some people were trying to get a roundabout in there, and a roundabout has some really wonderful advantages in the sense that it reduces the severity of crash and to a degree the likelihood. So we have some crash types go down in terms of less conflict points and a few other things. Look at the land take on it though. This is a 1-lane roundabout too. So big amount of land required. And that's because, a large vehicle needs to be able to track to get around it. And if they needed to U-turn, so you need quite a big circulating carriageway. The other thing, a couple more things on roundabouts is they don't perform that well when you have unbalanced flow. So if you have a big major road, meeting a minor road, the roundabouts don't perform that well. You can do things to manage that. You can meter them, for example, and metering involves sort of signalizing just one leg. And that way, when the queue of vehicles down here extends and extends and extends, you can sort of have a loop in the ground. It triggers, stops vehicles here, flushes some of these out, and they can go. And then you also have the possibility to then sort of connect that nicely to a shared path facility, so there's better pedestrian and cyclists crossing access. But that's one of the challenges. And then, of course, pedestrians and cyclists, and something we'll talk about in the next session. But we need a bit of thinking around how to manage those road users. But do they need to be as big as that? It's an interesting question. Here's a very, very small roundabout, isn't it? What I call a mini roundabout. This is a very different road environment. This one's in the UK, but the idea there being that we're not creating that massive deflection. It's all mountable, so a larger vehicle can just sort of track directly over that if they were coming through the area. We've lost some of the advantages of the roundabout without that deflection and the like, but we retain one big advantage of roundabouts compared to other intersection forms, or a lot of other intersection form, and that is a disruption of ultimate priority. What I mean by that is that a vehicle approaching here does not necessarily think they have right of way. Same with a vehicle approaching here or a vehicle approaching here. So that can be a really beneficial thing. When we have just a major priority road and a minor road, the major priority road, they just continue at speed, same alertness generally. Okay, so we haven't changed and disrupted that. Signals will do the same, even if it's a red light, a green light, they're just going. They're just going and they'll go through at speed and continue through. It's a real point of high risk. I showed you that. And if we can make people sort of slow down, look around, we've had these huge wins in road safety. We can do little bits and pieces to try to manage speeds through them if we are making smaller roundabouts and they don't have quite that deflection. It could be some raised features on the approach or some different deflection and the like. But just a bit of road safety engineering 101 for you. Roundabouts have less conflict points. So a conflict point being a dot where you can crash between vehicles. So this is just vehicle to vehicle. I haven't got pedestrians in this one or cyclists, but vehicle to vehicle, you see the dots there at the roundabout. But at a set of traffic signals, those are all the crash possibility, crash points, conflict points. The angle of crash is better. So certainly there's lots of different angles you can crash at a signalized intersection, but some of them are pretty bad. At a roundabout, you really find you are crashing in these better angles. And this one is talking about sort of that disruption of priority, but drivers unfortunately drive in all states of consciousness. Gee, we'd love them all to be alert and awake and had a cup of coffee and a big night's rest and be completely sober and Unfortunately, it's just a real mixed bag out there. We've got people who have, worked a double shift and they're driving to their sister's wedding, and they're, and we've got people who have had a couple of beers, and we've got people who are thinking about the fight that I had with their partner, and we've got people being distracted by kids in the back, and all sorts of stuff is going on in the vehicle, right? So if we are able to really engage the driver in the driving task at points of higher risk, that's great. Again, I stress, we would love them to be, really on task the whole time and really alert, but we've got to be a bit more sort of understanding of who we're designing for here. And around about a big lump of infrastructure in the middle of the road, or around about just the setup of it, it invigorates to a degree the driver. It makes them interact with the driving task, wake up, look around, slow down. It's just huge wins in terms of the management of risk. A set of traffic signals, not as much. Yes, certainly most drivers approach, they see it, they react, they slow down. But the continuous geometry, that straight through, some drivers just completely miss it and go straight through. Some are chasing the last bit of green in that red. Some are, just driving through intentionally. So we see a lot of this death and serious injury at those signalized intersections. Now, roundabouts, not all roundabouts are the same. And there's, we could do days and days and days worth of the specifics of roundabout design and all of that. But some interesting stuff around the more lanes you add to your roundabout, usually the less safe it is. And the smaller the radius, it becomes a little safer, so a little unsafe. So you see here, single lane roundabout, double lane roundabout, it's small. You see high, through speeds, which is generally a pretty good proxy for risk. Turbo roundabouts, they're two-lane roundabouts. They perform pretty much as well as a single-lane roundabout. And I think they're an interesting little case study, and partly just for your interest, but also partly to think about, okay, there's stuff we can do to enhance safety here. These are turbo roundabouts. So essentially they've got a raised separator between approach lanes. They've got a raised separator in the circulating carriageway. They're essentially creating channelized turn movements throughout the roundabout. Here's another one. So you see that raised separator and you see that raised separator. And so they get us sort of the same safety performance of a two-lane roundabout and one-lane roundabout. I like this photo, actually. I like the fact that we've got a truck here that's entering into the intersection. We've got a vehicle approaching here. Somebody's made a mistake. Looks like the truck driver may have made a mistake. But we just know that that's going to be an okay outcome, even if they crash. There's no way this white van can be going at super high speed. Okay, this is obviously a very European roundabout. It's got a very radial roundabout design. You can see how it goes in. And Australia often does a tangential roundabout design, which is going to have slightly higher speeds. But so it's going to be going slowish. The angle of crash, look at that. It's beautiful and bouncing off. And look at this one, eh? This is a turbo roundabout in the Netherlands. And we had a Dutch engineer we'd brought out to do some work at cyclists at roundabouts and the best ways to design roundabouts to improve cyclist safety. And I showed the Dutch engineer this. I've never been to this one, and I said, "This is incredible! Like, it just boggles my mind." And we talked about it for a while and how it functions. And I see Natalie's popped in a question, and I'll give a prize to Natalie for that, asking about signalized roundabouts, because this is a signalized roundabout. I mean, it's a turbo roundabout. It's signalized, but yeah, it just is amazing in the sense that you go, wow, okay, look at the land take on that. Look at the sort of complexity of it. I dare say if you're on the ground, it would be more obvious where you go and what to do and those sort of things. But we're sort of talking about speeds and volumes and those sorts of things. And I said, oh, yeah, those types of roads and those volumes in Australia, that'd be a large signalized intersection out on your outer suburbs, growth areas. It'd be a large signalized intersection. And the Dutch engineers just could not fathom that we would kill and seriously injure that many of our community. It's just and I was like, I agree. It's just that dumb thing. And they would opt for something like this to reduce speeds, to alter angles, to make it all happen at lower speeds and better angles going through this high-risk spot. It does look amazing, and it's kind of just fun to look at and imagine that. Yeah, I mean, the other things are this is cycling infrastructure is just off the screen. I mean, there's no possible way you'd be sending a cyclist through that, although I dare say in Australia sometimes we would probably throw the cyclists in there as well. But it's nice to see that we're starting to recognize this, and people are starting to try to come up with designs of large signalized intersections that start to address some of the inherent failures that they have. So this is a concept for a cut-through roundabout. It's not built, it is just a concept. But it's saying, okay, there's a large signalized intersection here. It's got lots of death and serious injury because people keep running the red lights and crashing into each other. What can we do to lessen them running the red lights, to lessen their speed, to change the angles, but still maintain some capacity through that? Like the other challenge we often face with roundabouts is it reduces the vehicle capacity. So these sort of things are interesting concepts. And I love the fact that people are now doing it, and we can start to say, okay, now we've got a large signalized intersection, but we've done something to address the severity of crashes. And that's going to be the critical thing. We really need to start addressing the severity of crash outcome. It's interesting, Suve there, right at the end, talked about, well, what about some sort of raised safety platform? Something to try to slow the vehicles. And at that one that you were looking at, in the end, that the region went through a lot of the thinking that you did very quickly. Your quick thinkers, but they took a long time to ponder and say, well, like a roundabout, but it's going to cost a huge amount, and then pedestrian crossings aren't going to be great, and but it's unbalanced flow, and they ended up saying, yeah, I think it's signalization is where we're going to go, but are we willing to just build another set of traffic signals where we know our top 95 of the 100 death and serious injury in our area are traffic signals? Are we really willing to just build another one and hope for the best? Yeah, we will reduce risk, and they're right on that, but could we do better? And safe system assessments sort of get involved in this and show that things could be done better. And they went with these raised safety platforms on those two approaches. Now, why not raise the whole intersection? Well, you don't need to. These are the vehicles that do the damage. They're the bullet vehicles. The vehicles coming in and going out do not have the speed to do the damage in those particular crash types. Now, these aren't like urban speed humps like you would see in the residential back streets. These are shallower, They're there to try to just calm speeds down, to alert the driver, to activate the driver in the driving task. And with the addition of that, we see the severity reduced and we see the likelihood reduced. The likelihood predominantly from the signalization, the severity from that reduction in speed we see. And so that's what they ended up building at that location. And you can see there that they put advisory speeds of 50. So they designed the ramp grades for about 50. Now, you could argue that we'd like to see that down to that 30 for the pedestrians crossing. They had to, this is a major arterial. It's taking a lot of vehicles and it's the like. So they're really predominantly trying to address the right angle crash between a vehicle coming out or a vehicle going in and a bullet vehicle. And that 50 kilometer per hour or below is what they were targeting. And so that's out there. Now that's an interesting one. And I was out there with a colleague. We were doing the post-opening road safety audit. Here's a photo we took while we were out there, and I sort of love this photo. I really got to blow it up and put it on my wall. Not because it's a high quality photo, but it's not bad actually. It's because of this. We've got a vehicle approaching a high-risk location, slowing down, and obviously activated in the driving task alert, right? I've got lots of friends still in traffic operations and the like, and they hate this photo. They say, oh, it's so inefficient. Like, why are we slowing every vehicle through when it's such a small risk that something's going to happen? And I'm like, are you kidding me? If we had put a roundabout there, everybody would be slowing down and you wouldn't bat an eyelid at that. It's just because this is different and new. But it's high risk and we've got to do something about it. And, that's sort of a really interesting change in our industry that we're trying to move along. And it goes sort of to the core of safe system, really. Mistakes will happen. We've got to minimize the severity when they do. This is another interesting little one. I just put it in here for a bit of your interest. There's a term in traffic engineering that some of you will know, the dilemma zone. The dilemma zone is the point in time and space where a vehicle is in a dilemma as to whether to put the foot down and go through the orange or to brake and stop. And the dilemma zone, you can calculate it and it's a certain zone. It just shrinks significantly when you have the raised safety platform installed because the driver's already got their foot on the brake. They're slowing to navigate over the platform and they just continue to stop. Interesting little benefit. So it's good to see that lots of these raised safety platforms and signalized intersections are now going in. This one's a crossroad, so they did raise the entire intersection because they could have bullet vehicles from any direction. This one carries 54,000 vehicles a day on one leg and 29,000 on the other. This is a massive intersection. And one thing that makes me really happy about this one is that it used to be a roundabout and they removed the roundabout to replace with traffic signals, which is something that has been going on for a long time. And in fact, I'll finish off. I'm going to jump into, actually, I'm going to give you a break now because I'm going to dig something out of my archives. And I'm going to tell you a little story about that removal of roundabouts replaced with traffic signals and why this one makes me so happy. And I was so frustrated at some different points in time. But how about that, Loretta? Can we take a little break?
Yep, sounds good. There is a question in the chat as well, so maybe get to that later. But yeah, we'll take a quick break.
For 3.5 minutes, and then we'll get back into it. So another question came in. Yeah, could warning signs and signalized roundabout be a better option? Possibly, yeah. Yeah. Signalized roundabouts perform pretty well. They certainly can take more capacity and not quite as much as just a signalized intersection, though. But yeah, let me tell you this story. Let me share my screen here if I can work out how to do that. Okay, so this is a, let me explain the background. I was in the government and the government had announced a huge congestion easing project at the time. I think it was Australia's biggest ever congestion easing project. It's called Keep Melbourne Moving, it was. And so it was that analyze all of these areas, how we're going to improve traffic flow. Okay. So the traffic engineers went off and did that. I was in the road safety department, and they came up with their concepts and their designs, and it had been all traffic modeled and everything like that. And they had to go through the road safety department for a review, and then off they go. And they were expecting us to review them with, is the phasing right? And, the appropriate warning signs and all of that. Well, we did that, the detailed review and, the bits and pieces. But we also started putting these memos on top because a lot of them were the removal of a roundabout to replace with traffic signals, because you get better traffic flow. Like, there's no doubt about that for cars, this is. And so this was, I took a copy of the template of the memo, so road safety department. So here we go. Road safety state. The road safety department has analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows. Project life, 20 years, you need to put a project life on it. Number of deaths attributed to this project, 2.3. Number of serious injuries attributed to this project, 12.6. Put little pictures of people to remind them we're going to kill and seriously injure some people here. And then statement of acceptance. The above RoadTron is accepted by, left it for the regional manager. So that would go on top of the projects and they'd be sent back. Well, did that cause some issues? Yes, it certainly did. Was I, myself and my colleague who were doing this, told to immediately stop that? Yes, if we were. I mean, the typical things came out, managing a road system is complicated. You need to manage, balance many different things. It really was, nobody would question the actual numbers we put up because everybody generally agreed, yes, that is going to kill more people and seriously injure more people. And you kind of need to sometimes strip it down to, well, then make that call and somebody own it. Anyway, so the reason, coming now back to what was showing before, if I can find it again, which was this intersection, a good 10 years after that program that I was showing you the memo from, there was another big congestion easing project, and lo and behold, they were pulling out roundabouts and replacing with traffic signals. But by that time, safe system assessments had become part of mandated practice in Victoria, and each one was subject to that safe system assessment. So the safe system assessments were doing the work that memo was doing in a much more acceptable and palatable way, and suggesting features like raised intersections and the like to just manage speeds now that we're going to get rid of that big feature that manages speeds through horizontal deflection, being the roundabout. And so, this one went in, which was, it's a good win. Now, I mean, there's specifics with it. Ramp grade's a bit shallower than I'd like here and a few other things, but generally pretty good. So there's good guidance out on road safety platforms these days. Victorian government has some pretty good stuff. Road Design Note 0307 is a good one if you're interested. That's available online. Austroads has the effectiveness and implementation of road safety platforms, which is, again, a good document. You see on the front cover there a New Zealand one down in Hamilton, New Zealand. They're starting to roll these out now, and that has been a general sort of theme now. At least people are understanding that high-speed signalized intersections don't have great alignment with safe system principles, and we can do more, and we must do more. So questions come in around the pedestrian risk at roundabouts. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about that in the next session. It's dedicated to pedestrian and cyclists and motorcycles, safety, and certainly roundabouts and pedestrians are a focus of part of that. There is increased risk for pedestrians at roundabouts. However, signalized intersections with high speeds are still not safe for pedestrians either. So it's not like putting a signalized intersection alleviates the road safety issues. Pedestrians like it more. They feel safer. They feel more comfortable. But we have that errant high-speed vehicle still that comes through. So another question, just while I'm looking at the chat there that's come in, was around the bus operations on road safety platforms. Yeah, it's something, and we've seen quite a number of things that people are concerned by that don't transpire as much of an issue as people have been concerned. So things like buses, heavy vehicles, emergency services, drainage, vehicles like, people thinking they're going to hit at a high speed and like fly off like Dukes of Hazzard style, these sort of things. They haven't transpired in these intersections. All that's happening is people slow down. The buses slow down, they go through it. The ramp grades aren't as harsh. It is certainly a consideration. All of those two that I showed, plus I've got a big list of them now. There's 16 major arterials with them, with bus routes and everything, and they're operating fine. Just another one I just thought I'd show you. We were talking before about roundabouts and the size of roundabouts and the cost and things. This was a interesting one for those worried about the cost of some of these big roundabouts. This is the arterial road through there, and before I go to that thing is a telecommunication exchange building. The property lines are right up to the road, so it's huge challenges on acquisition and big issues. But as somebody was pointing out before, they went with a compact roundabout approach, and it's really an interesting design because the roundabout itself is actually just that little middle bit. The bit around the outside of that is a concrete apron. And so a large vehicle can sort of track over that. So it gives you an ability to make it a much smaller. They didn't use reverse curves on the approach, and they tried some shallow raised platforms again. So really reduced. That cost about half the cost of what a full-size roundabout was estimated to cost. And there's a bit of sort of drone footage of it. You can see it's got a shallow platform, and it's got a very small sort of little island in the middle. And yeah, it's an interesting design approach. We've written some compact roundabout road design guidance, which again is on the Victorian government's website if anybody's interested, or could email me, because there's a lot of technical design detail in how you actually do this sort of stuff. At the high level, it all looks good, but it can get pretty problematic, as many of you would understand. I think there's a little pop-up quiz that Loretta might throw up there just as we do a little bit of thinking, and I'll just have a read of a question that's come in, or a comment. The question is true, false. Traffic signals are not safe system. True, false. Unintelligible question, meaning that doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? Write your question again, Ken. And well, the last people have a little bit of think about that. I'll just talk to Penelope's really good question in there and good point around that sort of cost of maintenance, construction versus health, death, serious injury. I was just over in the US at a conference. I was doing the opening presentation at the conference, and I did that sort of link back to construction of a high-rise building or something like that. There is no debate around things like adding rails to the balconies. It's not a cost trade-off with human health. It is that must be there. We need to start to take that attitude into our safety devices. It's hard. The other maintenance one is, again, like if we go back to traffic signals or something like that, well, they need power all the time. And people don't like, well, we're not going to do traffic signals because they need power and they need maintenance. They need maintenance all the time as well. So I feel people are sort of cherry pick the ones they want to complain about maintenance. So I push back on some of that, but as you do as well, but it is challenging. Vehicles per day that you would start not putting different range platforms. No, there's no, I would do it on any volume if you've got those speeds and angles, and in one sense, I would say even more important to have it there, because you're just going to have more exposure to crashes. You're going to have more death and serious injury. But I talked about this from a very much a road safety. I'm all about road safety, and I know people at the other end. So you've got to try to, do what you can to get these things in. Okay, what do we see here? Let's end that poll. Let's share the screen. We've got a bit of a mixed bag there, don't we? True, false, unintelligible question. Well, I haven't given you much context, have I? So I think that a lot of people saying true there are probably thinking that high speed one that we've just been looking at and we've said doesn't have good alignment with safe system principles. So I can understand if you've said true, thinking of that context. False, I can understand that as well, because to a degree, it's not the traffic signals themselves that have alignment with safe system principles. It's the context in which they're put. Unintelligible question because of all of that stuff I just said before. I don't even talk about safe system as a binary concept. That's not safe system, or that is safe system. No, I say, well, that aligns well with safe system principles, or that doesn't align so well with safe system principles. Bit of a mouthful, but it's more accurate to what we're doing. But the reason I wanted to put that in there, though, was that I do occasionally get people go out of this course and say, well, we can never do traffic signals because they're not safe systems. So, well, no, that wasn't what the point I was trying to get across. The point was that if you're going to use traffic signals, you're going to ensure that they're in a context where people's speeds are within tolerable levels, or they've got features added to manage the speed, and the consideration that people will just make mistakes, run the red light, and how we're managing the energy in that. Okay, thanks. Let's get rid of that. And I'll keep ticking along with a few more slides, then giving Loretta a good amount of time to talk you through the assignment that you've got to do, and I'll be able to do that. And hopefully we'll give you a little bit of time to start your assignment, do the quiz, but we'll see how we go. So again, a few little summary points of intersections. They're in your notes, the PDF that you can download. That was just a summary. So now we want to talk about lane departure or mid-block crashes, or those crashes that are, head-ons, run off road. Again, I'm going to focus on vehicles today, and on Tuesday, Max is going to really get into the cyclists and pedestrian components of this, and motorcycles as well. when we have these long, fairly straight roads, separated by a center line, they've got a bit of a sealed shoulder. You can see they've got a little bit of a clear zone, and then they've got trees and culverts and things. Without knowing the whole context of this road, apart from the fact that it's 100 kilometers an hour, and you can see bits of it, the occasional access point, occasional side road. What types of crashes do you think here are killing and seriously injuring people? Pop it into the chat. I haven't given enough prizes out today, have I? Okay, I'm going to give prizes to the first 3 that have come in. So Runoff Road, yep, Runoff Road, and Head On, and well, Wildlife's an interesting one. I'll give a prize there as well. So the first 4 get prizes. You got to be quick, eh? Wildlife's an interesting one. Yeah. Wildlife can often be the instigator of the crash. So people leaving the road, avoiding wildlife or the like, which is a runoff road, but it could be a factor compounding. So well done. And yes, lots of that. Oh, somebody gave us a DCA code as well. Thank you, 101. Fatigue, another big factor in that from Julianne. So let's give a prize there. I think that that was, oh no, wasn't the first one. Kiani was first in there with that. So I just gave away 5 prizes. Sorry, Loretta, you're going to have to try and keep up with that.
It's all good. I love giving out prizes.
Oh, good. Well, that's right. We see all of those things and just a lot of it. And it's hard to pick where on this road that goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, people are going to leave the road or leave their lane and enter the other lane. There's little things that slightly increase the risk. So the curves will slightly increase the risk. But there's significant risk here and here and here, all the way along. And to sort of look for crash clusters, we call that chasing the lightning strikes. You really struggle when you see that they just spread out along an entire route. And when a vehicle leaves the road, we talked a little bit about there the side impact pole crash test. So there used to be 29 kilometers an hour. It's gone up to 32 kilometers an hour, but it's a low speed. So when those vehicles leave the road, if they hit trees or poles or the like, we're in big trouble. This one is sort of predicted at 60 kilometers an hour. So it's quite a violent crash. And you see there it's just unsurvivable at these. So that's only predicted an impact speed around 60 kilometers per hour. So we really need to reassess how we manage this. Again, under a safe system, people will leave the road. They will leave their lane. How are we managing that? And the idea of creating cleared areas in the roadside is problematic. It's problematic, one, because we don't really want to do that. Like, it's often native vegetation. It's sometimes the only remnant vegetation left in an area. If you're trying to do that, you're going to pay massive offsets and huge other things. Sometimes you just can't, right? But also, it doesn't actually give us the best road safety outcome, because look, as you clear the roadside of hazards, you reduce risk, but then it just flattens out. And that's because people roll over or they go beyond anything we've cleared. So the idea of wide clear zones are often an impossibility to actually create. But also, they're not necessarily a safe place to be due to that rollover or going beyond it. So there used to be a if you looked at the old, and I say old, I'm only talking like the 2021 Austroad's Guide to Road Design Part 6, which is roadsides, barriers, and whatever it is. But it used to tell you basically to design a major new road kind of like this. Okay, probably without these shrubs in the middle, but and probably not with these truck rumble strips, were just a trial. But essentially you'd have 3.5 meter wide lanes or so. You'd have a big sealed shoulder. You'd have all your hazards set outside the clear zone of 9 meters or 12 meters or whatever you've calculated at, depending on their speed. You'd have a median that would be also clear zone width. And that's how we'd been building roads. But it doesn't. These roads have death and serious injury, even if they're built exactly to that standard. People leave the road. They cross the carriageway. They're going 110 kilometers an hour. They hit another vehicle. People fall asleep. They leave the road. They hit the trees. So there's something inherently not quite right about that. It requires too much of road users not making major mistakes in order to survive. The new Austroads Guide is better, but it still doesn't get us like all the way to where we want to be. Where we want to be is that for any road above about 80 kilometers or above, it should have full containment with barrier systems. It's, when the driver falls asleep, they should hit a barrier system. Okay, we're going to do lots to try to stop them falling asleep. We're going to do rumble strips. We're going to do, so audio tactile edge line. We're going to do, the fatigue stop, rest areas, other bits and pieces. But when they fall asleep, they'll hit a barrier system. That's the theory behind it. And that's our best alignment with safe system principles for these high-speed roads. And it sort of graduates down in alignment with safe system principles. I'll put some other cross sections and things, and a little bit hard to see probably, but I've got star ratings there for those who know about star ratings. Like the way you can look at the energy star rating on your fridge, for example, we can star rate a road for safety. And there's an international program to doing that, the IRAP program. So we go out there, we'll star rate roads. And you see there this big cross-section, wide median, sealed shoulders. It's a 4-star road. But to get it to a 5-star road, you actually need it's a smaller cross-section. It's just got to have these barrier systems. And then there's quite a few more of those, which I'm not going to sort of delve into the detail of. But there's lots and lots associated with the rollout of barrier systems. My colleague and I, Jamie Robinson, we run a 2 or 3 day barrier design course, all the intricacies, offsets, deflection, flare rates, terminals, motorcycle protection, the footings, all sorts of fun stuff. And this is a picture of some, challenges around pullover areas and contiguous barrier systems and the like, just to always, bear in mind. The last thing for today's session, before we jump in and show you the assignment and give you some time to do the quiz and the assignment, I just wanted to show this other thing about thinking of energy management. And I think it's a good example. This is a crash that occurred in Mildura. It was 2 in the morning or something. It was an old Ford with 4 young male passengers. The scenario is all too familiar. They went through a roundabout. Now, we've just talked about the safety advantages of roundabouts, but they've gone through very fast. In fact, it was estimated they were traveling at 92 kilometers per hour when they hit the power pole. And you know that even 5-star vehicles striking a power pole, anything above about sort of 30 or 40 kilometers per hour are in big trouble. 92 kilometers an hour in an old car, but they all only had minor injuries. And the pole had one of these Raptor cushions. Now, I'm not like trying to sell these Raptor cushions. I've got no interest in that side of things, but I think it's a really interesting demonstration of management of energy, because these things are, well, they kind of act as a bit of a cushion, but they actually rotate as well, which is a really important energy management consideration. So when they're struck, they rotate and sort of try to push the vehicle along, move the energy along with it, which is a unique sort of way of trying to think about energy management. But it's all about, again, severity. Like, how can we lessen the severity? And I really want you to, as you go out there and thinking about ways to reduce risk, thinking about that severity of crash. And a couple of key points in there around severity, the mid-block locations, just a few things to have a look at. And I think that gets us to the point where I was going to start to hand it over to Loretta to take you through the learning management system. But I do see something's popped in on the screen. IRAP rating doesn't change between 300 mil to 1 meter wide center line treatment. Yeah, so that's correct. There is a degree of granularity in the star rating system. It's just not that precise. So you might be able to get a very minor, like that might go from a, whatever it is, 3.175 to a 3.165 or something like that. Now, we don't give that precision usually. We just say that's a 3-star road, and that's also a 3-star road. So good question, though. Thank you. All right. Now I can see the learning management system on screen, so that's fun.
Thank you. All right. I just wanted to point out again, I know I mentioned this on Tuesday, but under the resources tab. So ensure that you're checking through those resources, really helpful. I know Ken mentioned the Raise platform sheet in there as well. So guidelines, etc. So please have a look. So basically for today, what you need to do is a quiz. I'll just bring that up in a sec. It won't be a moment. All right, so for module 2 today, again, lots of resources in here. So have a look at those items. There is that quiz. So clicking on module 2 quiz, and just like you hopefully have done already for module 1, is attempt that quiz and answer those questions. So that's the first thing to do. Hopefully we'll give you some time today to finish that. But most importantly, there is an assignment. So the module 2 assignment, I'll just bring this up. So just to quickly give you an understanding of, what to do with the assignment, and then Ken will run through it in a little bit more detail. So in order to submit your file, so once you've completed the document, so this is the PDF document here, and that will look something like this, which, as I said, Ken will bring that up, talk about that in a moment. Once you've got that, you need to save it and then add your submission. So clicking here to add submission, and you would simply either drag and drop the file into this box here or upload your file and then click on Save Changes. So that's once you've completed the PDF and you've saved it, ensure that you're submitting it that way. The due date for the assignment is Tuesday the 9th, so that's next Tuesday. If you have any issues, with submitting it, as I know Transport for New South Wales sometimes have firewall issues, just email it to training and we will upload it for you on your profile. So that's how you actually submit it in the system. But to go through the actual assignment, there are some instructions on this PDF. So Ken, did you want to run through this one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see there, once you've downloaded it, hopefully it's a step-by-step instructions. So hopefully it's obvious, but I'm going to take you through them step by step now. You're going to select an intersection. Now, this could be an intersection outside your house. It could be one you know of that you're going to go and use on Street View. It's up to you. You don't need to visit the site physically. If it is easy to do that, you can, but you can do it from Street View, whatever it is. For this assignment, next assignment, we're going to make you actually go to a site, but this one you could do from your desk if you want. So you're then going to, fill out the name, and you're going to put you put your name there, then you put the Street View link is our preferred, or you could just put the coordinates if you wanted, but the Street View link. So our assessors can have a look at what you looked at as well. Then we're going to jump down to the next table. And what we've got here are 3 columns: exposure, likelihood, and severity. And we've been practicing doing that, so hopefully you're somewhat comfortable with those. But what we want you to do is have a look at the intersection you've chosen and give us between 1 and 3 factors that increase the exposure to crashes. Now, remember, when you're thinking of exposure, think a little bit the number of people or the number of vehicles. Think like that. So what is influencing you say this is a major arterial, this is a major connector between these areas, this is a major pedestrian desire line between the bus interchange and the shopping center. These sort of things are influencing the numbers. And the more you can articulate this is about the numbers, the more the markers are going to go, good, this person understands exposure. And remember, this assignment is marked basically on, does this person understand what exposure is, what likelihood is, and what severity is? So you're going to dot point between 1 and 3 of those. Then you're going to look at the likelihood. You're going to say, okay, what factors in this intersection increase the likelihood or influence the likelihood of crash? And, it could be, it's confusing, or there's bad sight distance, or the skid resistance looks bad, or there's a see-through effect, or, anything like that. And you're going to put between 1 and 3 of those in. Then you're going to go over to severity, and you're going to say, okay, now, what is influencing the severity of outcome for the crashes that are going to occur at this intersection? And really remember, there's not a huge amount that we have that influences severity. Speed, angle, vulnerability of user, level of protection, those sorts of things. So you're going to put between 1 and 3 in there. So then you sort of analyze the existing intersection and what it is. And then we're going to ask you to put just one thing that you could change that would influence the exposure to crashes. And then just one thing that would influence the likelihood of crashes. And then one thing that would influence the severity of crashes. So you don't need to, we like you to think about it from a, practicality perspective, but don't get overstressed about, they could never do that, for these reasons. Because remember, this is an assignment to practice that, or to prove that you understand exposure, likelihood, and severity. So you don't need to get over concerned about that. Start a next session. As I said, it's Max. He'll take you through this, probably using an example and hopefully getting a volunteer to actually walk us through their site on Street View and talk about this. Now, there's no budget. I think that just came in as a question. No budget constraints on this one. No budget constraints, no even political acceptance constraints. You just need to prove to us you understand exposure, likelihood, and severity. Now, you notice there that there's like one, we said one thing for, ideas. Yeah. Like some people go, like they don't want to put lots and lots and lots of ideas in. That's fine, but we were just going to read the first one, or the assessors will. So you kind of wasted your time a little bit. Just prove you understand these concepts. Now, there's a couple of other things. You have coaching available. If you've been listening to that and you go, I don't really understand. Okay, get in contact. Email Loretta. Say, hey, can I get some of that coaching? There you go. The training at SafeSystemSolutions.com. Can I organize a little half-hour meeting with one of the Safe System assessment coaches? They'll talk you through. You could share screen. You could look at your site. You could talk these things through with them. We really want you to get your head around that. Okay. So you're going to do that. You're going to save it, PDF it, add submission, drop it in there. How long have they got to do this?
Yeah, so we hope that you can get it in before the next modules, so that way we do have a little bit to work with in module 3. So Tuesday the 9th, of course, we understand things come up. So, and that goes with, any of the assessments throughout the course. If you do need an extension, totally fine. Let us know. Again, email us and we can provide an extension for you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll just pause there to see anybody else wanted to pop in any questions. I think you do have a few things to do now, and that's why we're going to finish usually about 15 minutes early. And so do the quiz, jump in there, download the assignment, get that already. If you could knock all of this off before you finish, that would be good. And I think you almost might be able to do that if you work hard. Laura, anything else?
No, nothing else. That wraps up today's session. But again, log in a few minutes early next Tuesday for a bit more trivia and win some prizes. But that's it from me.
Yep, good chat next week. You're going to have Max talking about pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, and he'll go through a bit of that assignment. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ken. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.